My name is Ashley Mitchell, and this is Oregon State University Bio 435 Multimedia Presentation. Should the U.S. government require mandatory labels for GMO foods? I have decided to argue objectively in favor and in opposition for mandated food labeling. I will talk about the ethical, legal, and financial reasoning behind the controversial subject of GM labeling. Here we see two pictures of crops that have been genetically modified. The purple tomatoes clearly appear different than the usual red-colored tomatoes. Even without food labeling, we can tell that this crop has been modified from the original tomato plant. To the right, we see a picture of the BT corn that appears to look same as naturally occurring corn, but the genetic makeup of it has altered prevents pests from destroying the crop by infusing the chemicals commonly known as Roundup Ready. This genetically introduced chemical allows the corn to grow at a rapid rate without being destroyed by pesticides. Here I have listed the ethical pros for mandated food labeling. Inspired by the right to choose, consumers should have the ability to know what they are allowing into their bodies. The labeling should be enforced because 50 other countries agree that the labeling is important for consumers to know about. 85% of Americans would like to know where their food comes from. The fact that GM crops are used to enhance certain nutrients is important for people to know because we need to know how much of the nutrients we are receiving from our diet in order to control our own bodies efficiently. Look at the reason as to why it would be morally right to list the foods that have been genetically modified. The main reason why we would not want to do this is because the FDA has regulated GM crops as equivalent to other naturally occurring crops. The FDA does not think labeling is required and that educating the public on the GM crops would lead to the consumer's panic. We should also encourage labeling so people will choose to buy products specifically modified for the region to reduce the overspending of nutritional products and allow impoverished countries to spend their money on more resourceful commodities. The true investment in food labeling remains in favor of the financial return there is to gain. Currently, the certified organic crops retain the investment worth and look to gain an increase in profit if labeling were to persuade all consumers to purchase non-GMO foods or seeds. The change in demand would also lead to a more local financial gain and relieve third world countries of the high demand and in turn lowers their labor salary. However, GM crops look to gain investment by the patenting of their individual genetic modifications, including creating a monopoly off demand based on gene implementation itself. This is one graph as an example for the investment return, showing both the price, the revenue, and the net income all increasing over time. I believe the main pushback from food labeling, other than scientific reasoning, is the financial aspect. Not only would it be extremely expensive to create a program for food labeling, but the cost to enforce the regulations would be astronomical. However, the biggest financial loss to face would be the cross-contamination of crops due to pollination and what would end in millions of replanting and legal battles. This graph shows due to such complications that over time, from 2008 to 2009, many have decided against GMOs and against adapting them into their own crops.